The rain was steady that afternoon, the kind that made the city look half asleep. Emily Harper sat by the old piano near the window, her fingers moving slowly across the keys. The song was soft and familiar, her mother's favorite. It had been 2 years since her mother passed away. But the melody still felt like her voice echoing through the house. Emily was 28, an artist who had returned home after her mother's death. Her father, Richard Harper, a retired literature professor, lived alone in the same 2-story house that held too many memories. Emily often wondered how he managed to stay there when everything inside reminded them of what they had lost, as the clock ticked toward evening. The door creaked open. Her father stepped in, his coat damp from the rain, his glasses slightly fogged. He stopped when he saw her at the piano. "I haven't heard that song in a long time," said quietly, his voice gentle but strained. Emily smiled a little. "I couldn't sleep last night, so I thought maybe music would help." Richard nodded and stood near the doorway. He listened for a moment, his eyes distant. There was love in his expression, but also something heavier, something he didn't speak about then. Just as Emily began another song, a voice came from behind her father. "Richard." The piano stopped. Emily turned and saw a woman standing in the doorway, holding a small white box wrapped with a red ribbon. She was tall, with auburn hair pulled into a neat bun, and she wore a beige coat that looked expensive but simple. Emily's chest tightened. She knew that voice. It was Clara Reed, her mother's closest friend. Richard looked startled too, almost guilty. "Clara, you're early." Clara smiled softly, though her hands trembled a little. "I was nearby. Thought I'd bring those pastries you like." Emily didn't say anything. She looked from her father to Clara and then back again. Something felt wrong. Clara had been around the family for years. She had visited often when Emily was a child. After her mother died, Clara disappeared for months. And now, suddenly, she was here, walking into their house like it was normal. Emily forced a polite smile. "Hi, Clara. I didn't know you were visiting." "Oh, I just stopped by to drop these off," Clara said quickly. "Didn't mean to interrupt your music." But the way her eyes flicked toward Richard told a different story. Richard cleared his throat. "We were just about to have tea. Why don't you join us?" Emily hesitated. "Sure, why not?" The three of them sat at the dining table. The room was quiet, except for the rain tapping on the roof. Emily poured tea into 3 cups, her mind racing. Clara chatted about small things: a new cafe in town, a book she'd read, but Richard's gaze stayed fixed on his cup. His nervousness said more than his words ever could. After a while, Clara stood to leave. She smiled at Emily, though her eyes were apologetic. "It was good seeing you, dear. You've grown into such a lovely woman. Your mother would be proud." Emily smiled back, but it was tight and forced. "Thank you." When the door closed, Emily turned to her father. "Why didn't you tell me she was coming?" Richard hesitated. "It wasn't planned. She just stopped by." Emily looked at him carefully. "Really? Because it seemed like you were expecting her." He opened his mouth, but said nothing. That silence was worse than any lie. That night, Emily couldn't stop thinking about it. The way Clara had looked at him. The way her father's tone softened when he spoke to her. It didn't feel like 2 friends catching up. It felt like something else, something that shouldn't have been happening in bed. She stared at the ceiling, trying to tell herself she was overreacting. Her father had been lonely for a long time. He deserved happiness. But why Clara? Why her mother's best friend? The next morning, Richard left early. Emily found a small note on the kitchen counter, went out for errands. "Be back later." The handwriting looked rushed. Hours passed, and when the rain finally stopped, Emily decided to go for a walk. She took the long way through the park, trying to clear her mind. The streets glistened from the storm. People hurried past with umbrellas, but Emily barely noticed when she came home. The house smelled faintly of perfume, floral, not her own. There were 2 cups on the table and the sound of laughter coming from the living room. She froze. Clara was there again, sitting on the couch. Her shoes were off, her hair down. She looked too comfortable, like someone who belonged. Her father noticed Emily in the doorway. His smile faded. "Emily, you're back early." Emily's voice came out sharper than she meant. "Clearly." Clara stood quickly, smoothing her dress. "I was just leaving." But Richard stopped her. "No, stay. Emily, we were just talking about your mother." Emily stared at him. "You were talking about Mom?" She almost laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. With her. The silence that followed was thick. Clara looked down, unable to meet her eyes. Emily's voice trembled. "You can't be serious, Dad." Mom trusted her. Richard tried to speak, but she shook her head and left the room before he could. She went straight upstairs, slammed her door, and sat on the edge of her bed. Her chest hurt. Not from anger, but from the sadness that came with realizing her world wasn't what she thought it was anymore. Downstairs, the voices grew quieter, and then the front door closed again. Later that night, Richard knocked softly on her door. "Emily, can we talk?" She didn't respond. "I didn't plan for this to happen," he said through the door. "Clara helped me through some very dark months. I didn't mean for you to find out this way." Emily finally opened the door. Her eyes were red, but her voice was calm. "You didn't mean for me to find out. You think that's what hurts me? It's not just about you being lonely. It's about who you chose. She's not just anyone, Dad. She was part of our family." Richard looked defeated. I know what it looks like. But it isn't what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He didn't answer. Emily stepped back and closed the door quietly. She didn't want to hear excuses. That night, she sat by the window again, watching the lights from the street flicker against the rain-smeared glass. The piano downstairs was silent. The house felt colder than ever. She thought about her mother, how strong she had been, how she had always believed in love that lasted. And now that belief felt broken. In the following days, Clara didn't come by. Maybe she was giving them space, or maybe she was ashamed. Richard moved around the house quietly, speaking only when necessary. Emily focused on her art, painting late into the night to distract herself. But every stroke of the brush carried emotion she couldn't control, the ache of betrayal. The confusion of seeing her father as more than just a parent, but as a man who could make mistakes. Then, one evening, she heard the sound of the piano again. Slow, hesitant notes drifted from downstairs. Her father was playing the same song she had played the day Clara first came over. She walked down the stairs, silently, and stood in the doorway. His hands trembled on the keys. When he saw her, he stopped. "I used to love hearing your mother play this," he said quietly. "It made the house feel alive." Emily's voice softened, though she still hurt. "Then maybe you should remember what it meant to her before you let someone else sit here." Richard didn't reply. He just looked down at the keys, his eyes wet with regret. Emily turned and walked away. She didn't know what would happen next, whether she could forgive him or if Clara would come back again. But she knew one thing. Something inside her had changed. The family she thought she knew was gone. And as the rain began again outside, Emily realized this was the moment everything shifted. The quiet before a truth she wasn't ready to face. The days after Clara's visit stretched long and quiet. Emily Harper moved through the house with careful steps, trying not to notice her father's presence, trying not to feel the tension in the air. Richard kept himself busy, reading old books, rearranging the shelves, occasionally glancing at her from the corner of his eye. The silence was thick, almost unbearable, but neither spoke of what had happened. Emily focused on her paintings. She sat at the big window in the living room, brushes in hand, staring at blank canvases, hoping to fill them with colors that could drown out the ache in her chest. Every stroke carried emotion she didn't fully understand: sadness, confusion, anger, but also something deeper, a longing she couldn't name. The house smelled faintly of rain and old wood, the air still carrying remnants of Clara's perfume. One morning, Emily found a small envelope tucked under the piano keys. It was addressed to her in her mother's handwriting. She picked it up, feeling the familiar weight of her mother's presence through the paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a letter she had never seen before. "Emily, if you are reading this, I am no longer there to guide you. Remember that love is not about possession or replacing what is lost. Life will bring people into your world who test your heart. Judge them not by what they take, but by what they give. And always, always remember to forgive yourself and those who love you." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She read the lines over and over, letting the words sink in. Her mother's voice, though absent, was somehow still reaching her. It reminded her that the world was not as simple as right or wrong, and that love could be complicated without being cruel. That afternoon, Richard knocked gently on her door. "Emily, can we talk?" She didn't answer. She knew he would try, but she wasn't ready. The anger and hurt were too fresh, even though her mother's letter whispered forgiveness. "Emily," continued softly, "I don't want to lose you. I know what you think, but Clara, she has been helping me through months I didn't know I could survive. I never meant to hurt you." Emily opened the door slowly, her eyes red from crying. "Dad, it's not just that you're lonely. It's who you're choosing to lean on. She was Mom's friend. It's not right." Richard stepped closer, his hands slightly raised as if to show he meant no harm. "I know how it looks. I know I should have been honest sooner. But I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you or betray Mom's memory." Emily shook her head. "It's already hurt, Dad. And it's not just about betrayal. It's about trust. I can't just pretend this didn't happen." He nodded, accepting her words without argument. There was no excuse he could give that would make it better. He had to let her process it in her own time. For weeks, Emily tried to avoid the topic. She painted more than ever, filling canvases with stormy skies, crowded streets, solitary figures walking under street lamps. She threw herself into her work to keep her mind from wandering to her father and Clara. But every time she heard the faint echo of piano keys from downstairs, her heart skipped a beat. Then, one evening, the sound came again. Slow, hesitant, uncertain. Emily recognized the melody immediately. It was the song she had played the day Clara first came over. She went to the staircase, leaning over the railing, saw her father sitting at the piano, his fingers moving carefully over the keys. His head was down, his eyes focused on the notes. But there was a quiet sorrow in his posture. Emily descended the stairs slowly. "You're playing again," she said softly. Richard looked up, startled. I didn't think you'd hear me." "I can hear everything in this house," she said, her voice calm but heavy. "Why now? Why play it?" He paused. "Because I miss her, and I miss the music. Mom's music made the house feel alive. I guess I needed to remember that, even if it hurts." Emily didn't reply immediately. She stood there, her eyes fixed on him, trying to see the man she loved as her father and the man who could make mistakes. The more she stared, the more she realized that grief could twist love into shapes no one was prepared for. I don't know if I can accept it yet," she admitted finally. "Seeing Clara here, seeing you, it doesn't feel right. And yet I know you're still Dad. That hasn't changed. But everything else is—" She trailed off, unable to find the words. Richard nodded. "I understand. I only hope in time you'll see why she was here. Not to replace your mother. Not to take her place. Just to help me keep living." Emily left the room without another word. She went back to her studio and picked up a brush. For the first time in weeks, she painted with a sense of clarity, even if it was tinged with sadness. The rain outside had stopped, and the sun broke through the clouds, spilling golden light across her canvases. Days turned into weeks. Clara did not return immediately, respecting the space Emily needed. Richard remained patient, giving her the distance she asked for, quietly watching, silently hoping. Emily continued to paint, and slowly, she felt her heart begin to untangle from the anger that had consumed it. Then one evening, Clara appeared again. She was standing at the doorway, holding a small bouquet of flowers, her eyes gentle and careful. She smiled at Emily. "I didn't want to intrude," she said softly. "I know this is hard." Emily didn't speak immediately. She studied Clara carefully, measuring her intentions, trying to see the person behind the woman who had stepped into her father's life. Clara's expression was honest, vulnerable even, and Emily felt a strange sense of empathy. After all, she too had loved her mother and wanted to honor her memory. "I don't know what to say," Emily admitted. "You were close to Mom, and now you're close to him." Clara nodded. "I know it looks complicated. It is. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I care about your father. And I care about you, Emily. I don't want to come between anything, but I can't hide my feelings either." Emily sighed, the weight of grief and anger pressing down on her chest. "I guess we just need time." Clara agreed, placing the flowers on the table. She left without another word, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts and memories. The house felt both empty and full at the same time, empty of certainty, full of emotion. That night, Emily picked up her mother's letter again. She read the lines once more, letting the wisdom sink in. Forgiveness wasn't easy. Trust wasn't immediate. But love, in all its forms, was complicated. And life demanded patience. Over the next few days, Emily started to play the piano again. Tentatively at first, but then with more confidence. She played the song her mother had loved, letting the notes fill the house, letting the music mend the broken spaces in her heart. Richard listened quietly from the doorway, tears in his eyes. He did not speak. He simply let her music remind him of what mattered: family, love, and the fragile nature of time. One afternoon, Emily and her father sat together on the porch watching the sunset. The air was cool, the sky painted in orange and pink. She turned to him and said softly, "Dad, I miss her. But maybe she'd want you to be happy. I just need more time to understand." Richard took her hand gently. "That's all I've ever asked for." In the following weeks, a cautious balance returned to the house. Clara visited occasionally, always respectful, always careful. Emily still felt tension at times, but the anger that had consumed her began to soften into acceptance. She painted more than ever, her canvases reflecting life in all its complexity: love, hope, and forgiveness. One rainy evening, Emily stood by the window, looking at the city lights. The piano played softly downstairs. Her father and Clara's voices could be heard talking quietly, laughter barely breaking the silence. And Emily realized something she hadn't before: hearts could heal even when broken. Love could be messy, but it could also endure, even in unexpected forms. The rain stopped. The sun returned. And in the quiet moments between heartbeats and piano notes, Emily understood that life didn't offer easy answers, only moments to navigate, to forgive, to feel, and ultimately to move forward. And so, the house that once felt like a gallery of grief slowly became a home again. Imperfect, complicated, and full of life. Emily knew there would still be hard days, but she also knew that the bonds of family, honesty, and emotional truth were strong enough to survive the storm. The melody of her mother's song lingered in the air, a gentle reminder that love, no matter how tested, could always find a way back.